Friends, here I am back again, but here I have changed from a low tech style to slightly high tech style. You can see my slides, which actually I have written up today morning, and then I have tried to use the cam scan and do the scan and trying to do it today for today. Let me see, because writing tech file takes a lot of time, and I have been writing so many tech files. I have to handle that. Mm, this would be additional work. So this is the second lecture on the advanced convex optimization series. These convex optimization series is meant to be a mini tutorial for students who would work in electrical engineering, in communications, or in machine learning for computer science. So if you look at my first talk on that in this series, which it's called mm, kind of an invitation to this area, there I had given a brief idea of what's a convex function, subdifferentials, etc. So here I'll try to show you how to compute subdifferential, what are the requirements, what are the calculus rules, etc. So here you can see what's up here, that we are talking about advanced convex optimization, and the part one is subdifferential and the computation. We will gradually move on. We will see, we come in a very natural way into algorithms. In our next talk we will be inside algorithms, right? So I don't want to define subdifferentials again, but just to recall, if people who had not seen it, but I would suggest you that we go to my NPTEL course on convex optimization, which was recorded in 2013, and have a look at that. So that has huge amount of details. Now here, if you see what I'm trying to show you, if you could see the cursor also, that we talk about a convex function which is extended valued, and you know that in our last talk we have already spoken about convex functions being extended valued, and that's what's important. That is how the whole edifice of convex analysis is built. Now we consider a proper convex function, that is, this is a function which actually has at least one finite valued point, means that is one x bar for which x for which f of x is finite. So collection of all such points where x is finite is called the domain of f, and in this case we choose a point x bar from domain, and then if x bar is in the domain of f, which we call dom f, then v element of Rn is a subgradient of f at x bar if this inequality, this one, fx minus fx bar is greater than equal to the inner product between v and x minus x bar. This holds true. The subdifferential of f is a collection of all these subgradients, and you know all these things already. Now if x bar, suppose the domain has an interior, so it's a full dimensional convex set. So dimension of a convex set is the dimension of the affine hull in which it is contained. See, all these terms, affine hull, convex hull, all these things I assume you know, because this is an advanced course. Now you see here, if x bar is in the interior of dom f, then del fx bar, the subdifferential, is not only an empty set, it is convex and compact. See, one very important thing in convex optimization, we are moving to a notion of a derivative, even at a point where which doesn't have the derivative in the usual sense of the gradient. There we have moved over to a notion where the notion of a derivative is replaced from a vector to a collection of vectors, a set. So x bar, if it is in the int of dom f, then del f x bar is non-empty, convex and compact. Of course, if x bar is not in dom f, we have to define del f x bar as phi. That's sure. Now in this case, if you want compactness also, that is convex, closed and bounded, the boundedness of the subdifferential is only guaranteed only when the interior of the dom of x exists. Because every convex set need not have an interior, because for example, if you take for example this one, a kind of a plane in R2, then a plane in R3, embedded in R3, this is a convex set but does not have an interior. Okay, so like any page, if you hold, that doesn't have an interior but has something called relative interior. So these are the notions I want you to go back and see. Relative interior is nothing but, if you take the ball in R2, its intersection with that set, or the affine hull of that set, that has to remain within that set. If that happens, then we say it is a relative interior. That is, this set does not have an interior in R3, but in R2 it has an interior. That's the idea. So that is called a relative interior. So every convex set has a relative interior, but it may not have an interior. If it is in the interior, it is full dimensional. That's Rn is its affine hull. Now here is an example of a function which is fx is equal to 0 when x is 0 and plus infinity elsewhere. Here 0 is the point 0 is the only point in the dome F, and it's a convex set and hence has a relative interior which is itself. But del F0 is R here. Because what would happen? Because fx minus f0 greater than equal to v into x minus x0. So it is plus infinity minus 0, which is plus infinity greater than some v into x minus x0. So whatever v you choose doesn't matter. Any r you can choose. Anyway, infinity is always bigger than whatever real number. So whole of R, but R is not a compact set. It is a convex set. It is a non-empty set. It's a closed set, but not compact. Closeness of subdifferentials you can easily prove, and convexity of subdifferential set at a given subdifferential set you can easily prove. So we will not get into the details of proving those things. So what happens if you have x bar in the relative interior of dome F, not in the interior, then del f x bar is not equal to phi, convex plus closed, but boundedness won't come. There can be points which lies in the boundary of the dome F where there can be problems, where you may not have the luxury of having a non-empty subdifferential. So coming inside the interior makes things better. That's the key idea that you should take over. So here is a example of a function which is infinite when x is less than 0, and it is, you can draw it, it is 1 when it is x is 0 and x square when x is greater than 0. So this doesn't have a at del f0 is empty. Now this is a computation technique which I had already told you in the last lecture, that the easy way to compute the subdifferential is to look at a given x bar, take a neighborhood around it and look at all the sequences xk which is coming towards it, and only look at those points of xk which are differentiable, that is there in D, and calculate the gradient at those points, and then look at the limit of those gradients. So collect all those limits and take the convex hull. Of course, the proof and why it is so would need you need to write that, then that would be a whole class basically, that needs a board and all those things to explain, but just take the idea on, and so that you can work on it. So it's not very rigorous, but not that useless too, I would say. So you take this example, max of x squared x, which I often give in class when I have taught my optimization course here in IIT Kanpur, and that this example has been shown as one interesting example which brings out certain properties of subdifferential, as well as at the same time talks about this. Of course, one thing must be clear to you, that at a point where the gradient is, where the function has a gradient, that is, it is differentiable, the only element, the del fx or the subdifferential contains at this point, is a subdifferential. But you can actually prove it. It's very simple, because if it is differentiable at a given point, the directional derivative is, and any direction is expressed as the gradient at that point in a product with that direction. This is the example. This is a fact you know from vector calculus. It is nothing extra for convex analysis, but this is our standard right hand sided directional derivative. The directional derivative of a convex function. So now if you take xi element of del fx, any xi, and if you take any point x bar plus lambda v where lambda is greater than 0, then the first line that you see here, this one, is a subgradient inequality. And then you take the lambda out here, divide by lambda, and take the limit as lambda tends to 0. Lambda down arrow 0 means lambda is greater than 0 but tending towards 0. Okay. Then this is nothing but the directional derivative by definition, and that is equal to grad fx bar v. So once you have done that, this is what you get at the end, and this is true for any v that you choose in Rn. And no linear function can maintain the same sign over whole of Rn. Otherwise, it will have a minimizer over whole of Rn, or maybe a maximizer, which is not true for a linear function. Hence, grad fx bar must be xi. So voila, as a friend said, the proof is complete. A very important thing which we are not giving a proof is to keep in mind is that if f is a convex function, then if a convex function f is differentiable, then it is continuously differentiable. That is x to grad f x, the function, the gradient function itself, that is the partial derivatives of the convex function, they are continuous as functions of x1, x2, dot 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 xn. This thing you have to keep in mind completely. So when somebody says let us take a continuously differentiable function, it makes sense, but you don't have to say it. Once you say a function, a convex function from Rn to R is differentiable, then it's continuously differentiable. This is a very kind of very strong thing which convexity has, which the other functions lack, and as a result of which it is much more easy to work with convexity. Our idea would be now to compute the subdifferential of the Euclidean norm, which you know is a convex function, because its absolute value, in case of x modulus of x, absolute value of x, you know the graph very well. All these things have been done in the previous lecture of this series. So norm x is equal to root over x1 square plus x2 square plus xn square, the n-dimensional Pythagoras theorem or Pythagoras theorem, whatever you want. Now x bar equal to 0 is the only point of non-differentiability. There is no other point of non-differentiability. And in that case, you write the subgradient inequality, and from here you get this one. And those who know some functional analysis, those who have studied something, or those who know about what is the meaning of a norm of a matrix, for example, if you know that, what is the spectral norm of a matrix, L2 norm of a matrix, then you can think of the vector v as a kind of matrix, and then you can, that's in your mind, don't have to be really thinking that it is just really a matrix. But if you know that, if you know some functionality, you will realize that this is nothing but norm v less than equal to 1. So basically the subdifferential is the closed unit ball. Now you can immediately see what we have done. We have, our intuition has taken us up. We could have done it without calculation. That it was the unit interval around 0, -1 plus 1, closed interval, when we had taken fx is equal to the absolute value of x. This is the generalization of fx equal to absolute value of x. So at 0, what is the interval, rather what is the neighborhood around, what is the generalization of the delta neighborhood around that, around the point 0, 0, or a neighborhood of length 1 when delta is 1, that is the closed unit ball. That's the idea. So that idea, which was in one dimension, can be pushed up into higher dimension. Convexity is actually a one-dimensional subject, because in some sense, not always, but given any convex function f, take a point x and take a point h, and write the function phi of t or phi of alpha as f of x plus alpha h, then phi alpha is a function, as a function of R is convex if and only if f is convex. So there is a link between a function of one real variable, convex function in one real variable, and function of many real variables. Now for the rest of the cases where x bar is not equal to 0, you can do the derivative. You can actually compute the partial derivative at xi, which I am not going to tell you, and hence you can write down the subdifferential in a very clear fashion. Now it is very important to know, because if I am telling that okay, the subdifferential replaces the derivative, are there any rules which the subdifferential follows which mimics that of the derivative? For example, the gradient of the sum of two functions is sum of the individual gradients. What does it mean for the subdifferential now? They are sets. So are we trying to say that the subdifferential of f plus g at x bar is equal to del of x bar plus del of g x bar? Maybe that is what we want. That would have been good. But what is the meaning of the addition of two sets? So here, the crucial idea is the addition of two sets A and B in Rn. So two sets A and B in Rn in this vector space Rn, A plus B is equal to z, where z, every a plus b contains element z, where z is of the type x plus y, where x is in a and y is in b. So this is sometimes called Minkowski addition, after the famous Hermann Minkowski, who was a teacher of Einstein in ETH Zurich, who told Einstein that possibly nothing would come of him, but later on Minkowski's one of the great contributions had been on the geometry of special relativity. That's the kind of irony. So, but this relationship, you can just write down the subdifferential inequality and prove this. Once you know this definition, you can prove this relationship. This will always be true. But I want the reverse to hold so that I can say that this also holds. Because that is what I want. That, okay, look here guys, even though I have sets, I can make the subdifferential behave like a derivative. And hence it is a true generalization of the notion of derivative for a convex function. So but if you are considering this kind of proper functions, convex function, this need not be true always. You need additional conditions. So one of the interesting conditions was given by Rockefeller in his famous book Convex Analysis in 1970, chapter 26 possibly. Somehow here, I don't see it here. Maybe I would show you sometimes later. So it says that if you take two functions f, dom f and dom g, f and g, and you take the domains, look at the relative interiors and see the intersection. If it is not empty, then for any x bar in the dom f intersection dom g, because when you add f plus g of x, which is fx plus gx, x must be defined for both f and g, so it must be for dom f and dom g. Of course, we are looking at points where f and g are finite, because at those points we can compute the subdifferential, because if something is empty, then okay, both the sides would become empty. So that's the thing we would try to avoid. So if the relative interior of dom f intersects the relative interior of dom g, that is the intersection is non-empty, then for any x bar that you choose from dom f intersection dom g, the del of f plus g x bar is equal to del of fx bar plus del of gx bar. Now if you have functions from Rn to R, like modulus norm x, then doesn't matter. Then for any x bar element of Rn, this will always hold, because relative interior of dom f here is Rn, so relative interior of dom f is interior of dom f, which is Rn, so Rn intersection Rn is Rn, non-empty, and hence that will hold. Now comes a slightly interesting law. But there are several ways conditions you can put under which this addition rule would be true. One of these is that let us have two functions fg from Rn to R, which are proper but lower semi-continuous convex function. And if x naught is some element in the intersection of the domain of f and g, then if either f or g is continuous there, then for any x bar in dom f intersection dom g, we will have that addition law true, that is this law true. But this inequality could fail. Why, I would ask you to think and catch, why would such an inequality fail? What would be the problem? So here is a situation. So one of the conditions given here in the Phelps theorem is not going to take place. So this theorem is from this book actually, Convex Function, Monotone Operators and Differentiability. So and the example is also from this book. So here are this is an example, which is a counter example, which tells you that it fails. So here you talk about a very interesting function, the indicator function. So the indicator function of a convex set is a very interesting kind of function. If you take an x which is inside the set, then it returns you 0. If you take x which is not in the set, then it returns plus infinity. So the set C is the domain of the function. And the subdifferential of indicator function is the normal cone. So we have not discussed all this, so I've given here as an example for those advanced people who can actually understand what it is. So there is a counter example that this inequality may not always hold. So you have to, so here what would be there is would be a failure of this condition. So there is no x naught in dome F intersection dome G. So you have to find what is the intersection between dome F intersection dome G in this particular case. Think about it. 0, 0 here. So in this particular case, the continuity will break. Neither F or G would be continuous in the dome F intersection dome G at any point. It will not be there. Because dome F intersection dome G is 0, 0 here. So del of F plus G 0 is R2 here, because that is the dome F intersection dome G 0, 0. So at that point F plus G is what? At 0, 0, F plus G is, you have put 0, 0, 0, 0, it is 0. It's just like the first example that we had studied. So it is infinity otherwise. So at that point del of F plus G 0 is R2, just like it was R in the example where we said that it was not compact and all those things. So here you see the compactness is broken also. But del F0 plus del G0 is different. But I am not getting into the calculation, but telling you that such an example exists, that if any one of these conditions go away, then this inequality, this equality may not hold. So these conditions are important. It's not that the conditions can just, the conditions are not really required. You see here, the interior of the dome F, there is the epigraph of the x square function, z square function, this one. And here, the dome F here is R itself, the x-axis. So the domain, the interior of these two domains don't intersect. The boundaries intersect at 0, but the interiors don't intersect. Of L and C, the domain. So basically C and L don't intersect. The interior of C and interior of L don't intersect. Right? So that thing also fails. So here all these two things fail. For both the Rockefeller's theorem and Phelps theorem, this fails. So here is an example. You just keep in mind that this thing can fail. So those conditions are necessary. It's not that you can just forget those conditions. If you are from Rn to R just, then you can forget the condition. Otherwise not. So here you have the subdifferential of norm of x1. Here I will calculate it in a way which is not traditionally done in books. I will look at a result which is very simple to prove that if you have a function f from Rn to R and g from Rm to R, could be any m, 2, 3, n could be 5, 6, whatever. Then h is a convex function from Rn cross Rm to R. So it's a simple thing, the proof is not very difficult. The second result is that the subdifferential of the convex function x bar at x bar, h at x bar y bar is the Cartesian product of the subdifferential of fx bar, means this set, and the subdifferential of f at x bar and subdifferential of g at y bar. You take the Cartesian product. The proof again is not difficult. The proof is there here. Anybody can ask me through the comment file or ask me through my email, because now you know me, you can type and find my email. If you want to send me these details, I can send you these details. But I want you to now focus on this result. Though the proof is done, but I will not go through the proof. I will want you to focus on this result. So you have to know that when you are in Rn cross Rm, so if you have two elements in Rn cross Rm, the inner product there is defined as the sum of the inner products in Rn and Rm, that is x1 y1, x2 y2. These are two elements in Rn cross Rm. You take their inner product. So just as if you have x1 x2 plus y1 y2 when you have just elements in R. So here you will have x1 inner product x2 plus y1 inner product y2. That is how you define it. Once you know that, then proving this is not a very difficult thing. So that's what you have to keep in mind. So you have done the proof. So let us just look at the things in R2, n equal to 2. We are not going to get into any details. So here norm, L1 norm means the norm x1 here means we are talking about norm x1. So if x1 x2 dot 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 xn is a vector in Rn, so norm x1 is modulus of x1 plus modulus of x2 plus dot 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 modulus of xn, sum of the absolute values of xi, summation mod xi, I is from 1 to. So here the x1, x2, norm of 1 is mod x1 plus mod x2. So now this can be viewed as h of x1, x2. This is f of x1 plus g of x2. So what we have just learned from here, so del of the subdifferential of the L1 norm or one norm function at 0, 0 is a subdifferential of this computed with respect to x1 at 0 and subdifferential of this computed with this function computed with respect to x2, the absolute value function computed with respect to at 0. But this is absolute value function. So their subdifferential is -1 to +1, that we already know. Inner product -1 into +1. So if you have -1 plus 1 and -1 plus 1, if you take the inner product, Cartesian product, then you get a square whose elements are, whose vertices are -1 plus 1, 1, 1, 1 minus 1, -1 minus 1, and that is nothing but and the square is nothing but the convex hull of this, and that square is nothing but the closed unit ball under the infinity norm. It is exactly this. So what is the infinity norm? So norm x infinity means you take the max of modulus x1 dot 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 modulus x1. You take the mod of everything, the absolute value, and then take the maximum of that, of all those among those n quantities, which is the maximum value, you choose that. That is your norm x infinity. Now what about, so here at 0, 0 I easily computed. What about at non-zero points? How do you do it? Let us take the point 0, 1. As I told you, just draw a small neighborhood around 0, 1. Look at that. On this line, that is the y-axis, at all points this function is differentiable, is non-differentiable. Because the first part, mod x1, mod x1 is not differentiable, the x1 part, because it is evaluated at 0. Other part x2 is differentiable. So this part it is non-differentiable on this part. But at all other points inside this neighborhood it is differentiable. So which means if I take points coming towards 0, 1, they are coming from either this side or either from the second quadrant or first quadrant. In the second quadrant, the absolute value norm or f of x1, x2, the norm 1 is given as -x1 plus -x2, because x1 is negative here, so mod x1 is -x1, x2 is positive but non-negative, so it's plus x2. Here it is both are non-negative, so x1 plus x2, right? So now if you take the derivative of this one, it is -1 plus 1 is the gradient, and if you take the derivative of x1 plus x2, it is 1, 1. So this is the convex hull. So this is that method we have taken. So we have just looked at points which is approaching 0, 1 from all these two directions or whichever directions. Ultimately it comes into the neighborhood and it is either coming from the first quadrant or the second quadrant. And then we took the derivative at those points where it is differentiable, took the limits, which is anyway -1 plus 1, they are fixed at every point, and also 1, 1, and then took their convex hull. So here is the derivative at 1, 0. At 0, 1. So it is crossing that point. This is the derivative, and of course the infinity norm is given by this. So in general, if x bar is in Rn, so you can generalize this, that the subdifferential of norm 1 function at x bar when x bar is 0 is the closed unit ball in terms of the infinity norm, right? Is a closed unit ball in terms of the infinity norm. Here we have shown in 2 dimension, we are talking n dimension. It is all xi element of Rn, so that norm xi infinity is less than equal to 1. Now what happens when x bar is not equal to 0? When x bar is not equal to 0, you can actually prove, I have written it down from a specific example of Rudzinski, which he has done for dual norms or conjugate norms. I have written it down from L1 function, specifically from that example. Rudzinski's book in 2006 is called Nonlinear Optimization. If you want, I can show you. Rockefeller's book has already been shown earlier. This is the book. It's a very good book, very good. And Andrei Rudzinski is one of the world's expert in stochastic optimization. It's great to learn from such leading optimizers. Always go to the masters. In fact, there's a famous saying of Laplace, read Euler, he's the master of us all. Maybe I should say that to all students of optimization, read Rockefeller, he is the master of us all. So, now what it says that if you have any non-zero point, then the subdifferential of norm 1 function at such a point consists of all such v's, which is of course in the unit ball of closed unit ball using the L infinity norm, using the infinity norm, that is norm v infinity is less than equal to 1, but also has this property that norm v inner product x bar is exactly equal to the norm of x bar in the one norm. So this is the additional property which here you don't need to bother, because that will become 0 anyway, because here the same thing will hold, because here if you take, for example, in the case when x bar is 0, you put it 0 here, you put 0 here, this side would be 0, this side would be 0, so we don't mention it here in the case of 0. So you can prove this in detail, but the detailing is there in Rudzinski's book, so I am not going to give it here. But for the case where we have done, for example, at D01, let us check it out. So D01, this convex hull can be actually written down like this in a more compact form, because then take lambda of minus 1 plus 1 plus 1 minus lambda of this, or whichever way you want to do. So then it can be written like this points. You can show that this infinity norm is 1 and this product is also 1, which is same as 0, 1. So here are the 3 books which I have used today. One is R.T. Rockefeller's Convex Analysis, the book, the legend actually, the Bible of our field, convex optimization. R.R. Phelps, this is the book on infinite dimensions. So just for optimizers may not always like to get into all this, but that's more for the convex analyst. Convex functions, monotone operators and differentiability. It hardly speaks about optimality in that sense, optimization. Rudzinski's book on all is infinite dimension, exceptionally well done, very good. Has a lot of things about algorithms. You'll learn a lot about other things like stochastic optimization, nice examples. I think the Rudzinski's book should be taken up as a text in a very good course, or at least a reference text. So thank you very much. I would stop here, and do put your comments and let me know whether you like my becoming slightly high tech. Okay, thank you very much.